It's now my pleasure to introduce Sandrine Dixson Declève, co-president of the Club of Rome, who's joining us from Brussels.
This is Sandrine Dixson Declève, co-president of the Club of Rome. She holds several advisory positions for the European Commission and private organizations and is a senior associate of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. Sandrine also co-founded the Women Enablers Change Agent Network, We Can. She dedicates her time to advisory work, lecturing and facilitating change in business and policy models.
Welcome, Sandrine Dixson Declève. We are eager to listen to your presentation.
Thank you so much for having me on what we're learning today is not only Earth Day, but Nick Stern's birthday. So happy birthday to Nick Stern. We Don't Have Time is such an important event. And I must say thank you for bringing us all together, because it is the message of our planetary emergency plan, which we as the Club of Rome already launched 3 years ago, before we even had the pandemic. And the message from that plan was very clear, that we needed to start to put in place key timetables and targets in order to get us beyond an emergency and emerge. We know that the greatest amount of greenhouse gases are coming from energy, industry, buildings, transport, and a series of other sectors. But in the energy industry, we also know that we truly, if we're going to make a difference during this decade of action, are going to absolutely have to pull out of fossil energy as soon as possible, and we declare in our plan by 2025. And the only thing that is truly going to help us facilitate that energy transition is to stop now any fossil fuel expansion, any production, halting subsidies and shifting revenues and investments to low carbon energy deployment. And this will really depend on setting end dates for fossil fuel-based infrastructure, for mobility, for electricity generation in alignment with scientific assessments. But what's important now is to also support those incredible institutions that have started to do that. We have, for the moment, only one multilateral development bank, the European Bank for Europe, so the European Investment Bank, that has actually declared itself a climate bank. And we need to have more of the multilateral development banks and also the private sector to really adopt this goal to pull out of fossil fuel energy infrastructure. But we also need to think about the massive capital shifts that we need to create. And Nick referred to this, the political will to set ambitious divestment policies alongside a tripling of investment in renewables and energy efficiency and green technology, not only in developed economies, but also in emerging economies. And the only way to truly do that is to start to put in place both the policies, but the market mechanisms that will shift those subsidies and those revenues to the right places. We do have the opportunity now, coming out of the pandemic, to think through very clearly how we want to design our future. And the fact that we're in the midst of a series of developments or recovery plans, many of which are not taking into consideration truly building back better, is incredibly troubling for us. If we want to really build a planet which is resilient to future shocks, we're going to have to up those just transition plans. We're going to ensure that we're going to have divestment plans that are put in place now, and we're going to have to ensure that we triple those investments. One of the key issues that we're facing today, and let's be very clear, as we sit here in Europe, is the debate that we're facing in terms of the taxonomy. A framework which was going to be the first of its kind, that was actually going to put in place the criteria for what is truly green and what is starting to be looked at as potentially brown. And that would mean that we would stop investing in gas infrastructure. Not that we would necessarily stop using gas, but at least stop investing in gas infrastructure, stop investing in fossil fuel infrastructure and production. So the call that we have on this very important program, when we say that we don't have time, is that we cannot wait for climate neutrality in 2050. We have to transform the 55% greenhouse gas reduction target that we now have at the European level the declaration that we're getting from other countries, including Biden today, to halve their emissions, into actions, which means pulling out of fossil, which means transforming the fossil energy industry into a renewables industry, into an electrification industry, and putting in place the market mechanisms and the market signals in order to enable that to happen. So this is the call that we have today. And for COP26, we are hopeful that if we're going to put forward some calls for a ban, for example, on ICE engines, that we have to have a call for a pullout from fossil energy, which is comparable to the science, which is telling us this is the only way forward. So yesterday we launched the 50 by 30 campaign, which is calling for governments around the globe to ensure that they cut their emissions by 50%, moving alongside the European Union, moving alongside now the Biden declaration and other brave countries that have done the same. I'm hopeful that together we can actually make this happen, that we can work with a series of partners, including the oil and gas sector, to truly divest. This will be difficult, but together we actually can do it if we start to put in place the right mechanisms, the phase-out schemes, the just transition plans to enable it to happen.